The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Sarah Mitchell barely noticed as she stared at the spreadsheet glowing on her laptop screen. The numbers were stark, undeniable, and terrifying. 175 people, 14 years, all connected to a single location in the remote wilderness of northwestern Montana. "You look like hell," her editor Jake remarked, dropping into the chair across from her cluttered desk at the Denver Tribune. "Please tell me you've got something concrete." This time, Sarah rubbed her tired eyes and turned the laptop toward him. "The Eternal Light Community. Ever heard of it?" Jake squinted at the screen, his expression shifting from casual interest to concern. "Religious commune? That's what they call themselves. Founded in 2009 by Marcus Thorne, some former Silicon Valley executive who claimed to have received divine visions." Sarah pulled up a photograph of a bearded man in his 50s, his piercing blue eyes staring directly at the camera. "They purchased 2,400 acres of land near the Canadian border. Completely self-sufficient, minimal contact with the outside world. And the missing people?" Sarah clicked through a series of missing person reports, each face representing a life that had simply vanished. Started tracking this after a tip from a source at the FBI. Young adults mostly, aged 18 to 35. All last seen heading to or already living at Eternal Light. Families file missing person reports, but the investigations always hit dead ends. Jake leaned back in his chair, processing the information. "That's a lot of people for one small community." "Here's the thing," Sarah continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "According to their own public statements and tax filings, the community maintains a steady population of about 200 members. If 175 people have disappeared over 14 years, where are the new recruits coming from?" The office around them had grown quiet as the evening shift wound down. Outside, Denver's city lights twinkled against the darkening Colorado sky, but Sarah's mind was already in Montana's wilderness. "I've been in contact with Rebecca Martinez," she said, pulling up another file. "Former member who escaped 3 years ago. She's agreed to talk, but only in person. Says phone calls aren't safe." Jake studied the missing person photos again, his journalist instincts clearly engaged. "What's your theory?" "I think Marcus Thorne and his inner circle are running something much darker than a religious community. The question is whether it's human trafficking, some kind of exploitation scheme, or—" Sarah paused, reluctant to voice her darkest suspicion. "Or what? Or they're killing them." The weight of the accusation hung in the air between them. Jake had worked with Sarah for 8 years, long enough to know she didn't make wild claims without evidence. "What do you need from me?" "Time and resources. I want to go to Montana, interview Rebecca, and if possible, get inside the community myself." Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring at the faces on the screen. "Sarah, if you're right about this, if there really is something that sinister happening, you could be walking into serious danger. I know." She closed the laptop with quiet determination. "But 175 people, Jake. They deserve to have their story told. Their families deserve answers." "All right," he said finally. "But you don't go alone. I want you checking in twice daily, and if you don't feel safe, you get out immediately. No story is worth your life." As Jake left her office, Sarah opened her laptop again and began researching the route to Montana. The Eternal Light Community was located in Glacier County, accessible only by a single dirt road that wound through dense forest for 30 miles. Perfect isolation for a religious retreat, or the ideal location to hide unspeakable crimes. She picked up her phone and dialed Rebecca Martinez's number. The woman answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. "Rebecca? This is Sarah Mitchell from the Denver Tribune. Are you still willing to meet?" "Yes," came the whispered reply, "but not over the phone. Meet me in Kalispell tomorrow at noon, the Lighthouse Diner on Main Street. And Miss Mitchell?" "Yes?" Be very careful who you trust up here. Marcus has people everywhere, and they don't take kindly to outsiders asking questions. The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in the darkened office. Tomorrow she would begin unraveling a mystery that had claimed 175 lives. But as she packed her recorder and notebooks, a chill ran down her spine. Something told her that the people of Eternal Light Community weren't the only ones in danger. The Lighthouse Diner buzzed with the comfortable chatter of locals enjoying their lunch, but Rebecca Martinez sat hunched in the corner booth like a woman perpetually ready to run. Sarah recognized her immediately from the photo she'd been sent shoulder length. Brown hair, nervous eyes that darted constantly toward the door, and the unmistakable posture of someone who'd learned to make herself invisible. Rebecca? Sarah slid into the opposite seat carefully, keeping her voice low. Thank you for meeting me. Rebecca nodded, her hands wrapped tightly around a coffee cup that had clearly been refilled multiple times. You sure nobody followed you? Here, I'm sure. Sarah pulled out her notebook, but Rebecca's eyes immediately fixed on it with alarm. Put that away. Not here. Rebecca glanced around the diner. Half these people have connections to Eternal Light. They supply vegetables too. Most of the restaurants in town do construction work, odd jobs. Marcus makes sure the community stays embedded in the local economy. Sarah discreetly slipped the notebook back into her purse. Then how do we do this? There's a hiking trail about 10 miles south of town. Glacier Ridge Trail. Meet me at the parking area in an hour. We can talk while we walk. An hour later, Sarah found herself following Rebecca up a steep mountain path, the Montana wilderness stretching endlessly around them. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant promise of snow. I was born into it, Rebecca began, her voice barely audible above their footsteps on fallen leaves. My parents joined when I was 5. Marcus was different. Then, or maybe I was too young to see the signs. What kind of signs? Rebecca stopped walking and turned to face Sarah, her expression haunted. The disappearances started about 3 years after they founded the community. At first, it was always explained away. Brother David decided to return to the outside world. Sister Mary felt called to missionary work in Africa, but they never said goodbye, never left notes. Their belongings would just vanish along with them. They resumed walking, the trail winding deeper into the forest. Sarah noticed Rebecca constantly checking behind them, her paranoia infectious. I started keeping a list when I turned 16, Rebecca continued. Names, dates, circumstances. 43 people disappeared during my 12 years there. 43. People who just weren't talked about anymore. Did you ever ask questions? Once. Rebecca pulled up the sleeve of her jacket, revealing a jagged scar along her forearm. Marcus said I'd fallen during kitchen duty. I remember him holding my arm down while Brother Paul stitched it up without anesthesia. Doubt is the devil's. Whisper, Marcus told me. Pain purifies the soul. Sarah felt sick. How did you finally get out? My friend Jenny. We've been planning to leave together, save enough money, wait for the right moment. Then one morning, she wasn't at morning prayer. Elder Thomas announced she'd been called home to the Lord, but I'd spoken to her the night before. She was scared, said she'd overheard something she wasn't supposed to. The trail opened into a small clearing with a view of the valley below. Rebecca sat down heavily on a fallen log, her composure finally cracking. They said she died in her sleep, but I helped prepare her body for burial. There were bruises on her neck, Sarah, finger marks. You think they killed her? I know they did. That night, I climbed out my dormitory window and ran. Walked 30 miles through the forest in the dark. If I hadn't known these mountains since childhood, I would have died out there. Sarah sat beside her, processing the implications. Rebecca, what exactly happens to the people who disappear? Do you have any idea where they go? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, staring at the mountains. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. There are buildings on the property that are off limits to regular members. Underground chambers, Marcus claims, are for food storage and meditation. But sometimes, late at night, you could hear sounds coming from below, crying, screaming. And there was always this smell ... What kind of smell? Death, Sarah. The smell of death. As they sat in the mountain clearing, the sun beginning its descent toward the western peaks, Sarah realized the true scope of what she was investigating. This wasn't just about missing people. It was about murder on a massive scale, hidden in plain sight under the guise of religious devotion. I need to get inside the community, Sarah said finally. Rebecca grabbed her arm with desperate strength. Don't, please. Whatever you think you can accomplish, it's not worth dying for. But looking into Rebecca's haunted eyes, Sarah knew she had no choice. Somewhere in those underground chambers, the truth about 175 missing people was waiting to be uncovered. The dirt road to Eternal Light Community stretched through dense forest like a wound cut into the wilderness. Sarah's rental car bounced over potholes and protruding rocks as pine trees pressed close on both sides, their branches occasionally scraping against her windows with sounds like fingernails on glass. She'd crafted her cover story carefully, a freelance writer researching sustainable communities for a lifestyle magazine. Her fake business cards and portfolio felt authentic enough, and she'd practiced her pitch until it sounded natural. Still, her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as the trees finally parted to reveal the settlement. Eternal Light Community looked deceptively peaceful in the afternoon sun. Neat rows of wooden buildings surrounded a central common area where gardens displayed the last vegetables of the season. Solar panels glinted on rooftops, and she could see members working in fields beyond the main structures. If not for Rebecca's stories, it would have seemed like an idyllic retreat from modern life. A man emerged from what appeared to be the main building as Sarah parked her car. He was tall and lean, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of gentle smile that immediately put people at ease. Everything about his approach seemed calculated to convey warmth and welcome. "Good afternoon," he called out, extending his hand. As Sarah stepped from her car, "I'm Brother Paul. We don't get many visitors out here." "Sarah Collins," she replied, using her prepared alias. "I'm a freelance journalist writing about sustainable communities. I was hoping someone might have time to speak with me about your work here." Brother Paul's smile never wavered, but something shifted in his eyes, a sharpness that didn't match his gentle demeanor. "Of course. Father Marcus will want to meet you personally. Please follow me." As they walked toward the main building, Sarah took note of everything. The children playing in the common area who stopped to stare as she passed. The adults working in gardens who paused their activities to watch her progress. The subtle but unmistakable feeling that every move was being observed and cataloged. "How many people live here?" she asked, pulling out her notebook. "About 200 souls," Brother Paul replied. "We've been blessed with steady growth over the years. People find peace here that the outside world can't provide." The main building's interior was simple but comfortable. Wooden furniture, hand-woven rugs, and religious artwork created an atmosphere of humble devotion. Brother Paul led her to an office where a man sat behind a desk, studying what appeared to be financial documents. Marcus Thorne was smaller than Sarah had expected from his photographs, but his presence filled the room. His blue eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl, even as his expression remained perfectly pleasant. "Sarah Collins," he said, rising to shake her hand. His grip was firm, holding a moment longer than necessary. "Brother, Paul tells me you're interested in our little community." "Very much so," Sarah replied, settling into the chair he indicated. "I'm researching sustainable living practices for urban dwellers who want to reduce their environmental impact. Your community seems to have achieved remarkable self-sufficiency." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her, We have. But true. Sustainability isn't just about solar panels and organic gardens, Miss Collins. It's about sustaining the spirit. Creating a place where people can shed the contamination of modern society and find their authentic selves. That's a beautiful philosophy. How do you help people make that transition? With patience, guidance, and sometimes difficult choices. Marcus's smile never wavered, but his words carried an undertone that made Sarah's stomach clench. Tell me, what drew you to write about communities like ours? The question felt like a test. Sarah had anticipated it and prepared accordingly. I think many people feel disconnected from meaningful community in modern society. There's something appealing about places where people work together toward common goals, support each other through difficulties. Indeed, and are you yourself seeking that kind of connection? Before Sarah could answer, a young woman entered the office carrying a tea service. She was probably in her early 20s, with long blonde hair and the kind of ethereal beauty that belonged in Renaissance paintings. But her eyes held the same hollow quality Sarah had seen in Rebecca's. "Thank you, Sister Elizabeth," Marcus said as the woman served tea with practiced precision. "Sister Elizabeth joined us 2 years ago from Seattle. Perhaps she could show you around our facilities while we finish our conversation." Elizabeth nodded silently, her gaze never quite meeting Sarah's. There was something deeply unsettling about her submissive demeanor, the way she seemed to exist in Marcus's presence, like a shadow waiting for direction. "I'd love a tour," Sarah said, accepting the cup of tea Elizabeth offered. The liquid had an unusual bitter aftertaste that lingered on her tongue. "Excellent," Marcus replied. "Sister Elizabeth will show you our workshop areas, gardens, and living quarters. We believe in complete transparency about our way of life." As they left the office, Sarah noticed Elizabeth's hands shaking slightly as she walked. The young woman led her through various buildings, speaking in a monotone voice about daily schedules, work assignments, and community rules. But when they passed near a basement entrance in one of the residential buildings, Elizabeth's step quickened noticeably. "What's down there?" Sarah asked casually. Elizabeth froze mid-step, her face going pale. "Storage," she whispered. "Just ... Storage." But Sarah had caught something else in that moment, a sound from below. Faint, almost inaudible, but unmistakably human. Someone was crying in the darkness beneath their feet. As the afternoon sun began to set behind the mountains, Sarah realized she was standing at the edge of something far more sinister than she'd imagined. The tea's bitter aftertaste, suddenly, seemed more ominous, and she noticed Elizabeth watching her with an expression that might have been warning or apology. The welcoming facade was beginning to crack, and Sarah suspected the real horror was just beginning. Sarah's head pounded as consciousness slowly returned. The bitter aftertaste from the tea lingered in her mouth, and her vision swam as she tried to focus on her surroundings. She was lying on a narrow cot in what appeared to be a basement room, lit by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. "You're awake," the voice came from the shadows near the door. Elizabeth emerged into the dim light, her ethereal beauty now seeming ghostly and hollow. "I'm sorry, I tried to warn you, but Marcus was watching." Sarah struggled to sit up, her limbs feeling heavy and uncoordinated. "What did you put in the tea?" "Something to make you sleep." "It was either that or..." Elizabeth's voice trailed off. But the implication hung in the air between them. "Where am I?" "The lower level of the residential building. These rooms are where they keep people who ask too many questions." Elizabeth moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The walls are soundproof, but sometimes you can still hear the others." "Others?" Sarah's blood ran cold. "How many others?" Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "Right now, maybe 20. People who tried to leave or who discovered things they weren't supposed to know. They tell the community that these people chose to retreat for intensive spiritual counseling." Sarah forced herself to stand, fighting against the lingering effects of whatever drug they'd given her. Rebecca Martinez was right. You're holding people prisoner. It's worse than that, Elizabeth whispered, glancing nervously at the door. The people who disappear completely. They don't just leave the community, they die here. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. How? Marcus calls it spiritual purification. He says some souls are too corrupted by the outside world to be saved, so they must be released. Elizabeth wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the basement's stuffiness. There's a ceremony. The whole community gathers. They make us watch. Sarah felt sick. How long have you known? Since my 3rd month here. I witnessed my first purification ceremony and tried to run that same night. They caught me before I reached the forest. Elizabeth rolled up her sleeve, revealing scars that crisscrossed her arm like a map of pain. Marcus said my doubt needed to burn away. Why haven't you tried to escape again? Because they have my sister. Elizabeth's voice broke completely. Emma came looking for me 6 months ago. They told her I'd asked her to join the community, that I was happy here. She believed them because I had to lie to her face. If I don't cooperate, if I try to leave or help anyone else escape, they'll make Emma disappear too. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside their door. Elizabeth quickly wiped her tears and stepped back into the shadows. Remember, she whispered desperately, you're here for spiritual counseling. If you fight them openly, they'll move you to the deeper levels, and nobody comes back from there. The door opened and Brother Paul entered, accompanied by 2 other men Sarah hadn't seen before. They were younger, probably in their 30s, with the kind of intense devotion in their eyes that made them seem more dangerous than any weapon. Miss Collins, Brother Paul said with that same gentle smile she'd found so unsettling earlier. How are you feeling? Confused, Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. What happened to me? You became overwhelmed during your tour. Sister Elizabeth noticed you were becoming distressed and helped you to this quiet place to rest. Brother Paul moved closer, studying her face. Sometimes visitors find our way of life challenging to understand. I'd like to return to my car now. I should be getting back to town. I'm afraid that won't be possible just yet, Brother Paul replied. Father Marcus believes you would benefit from some intensive spiritual counseling to help you process what you've experienced here. The other 2 men positioned themselves near the door, making their role as guards obvious. Sarah realized that her worst fears were being confirmed. She wasn't a guest anymore. She was a prisoner. How long will this counseling take? Brother Paul's smile never wavered. That depends entirely on you, Miss Collins. Some people find peace quickly. Others require more extensive guidance. After they left, locking the door behind them, Elizabeth emerged from the shadows again. You need to understand something, she said urgently. The purification ceremonies happen on the new moon. That's in 3 days. If you're still here then, if they decide you can't be saved, quotes, Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. How do people usually die? Poison. They call it sacred wine. The person drinks it voluntarily while the whole community watches and sings hymns. Marcus says it's beautiful, that the purified souls experience divine ecstasy as they pass into the next realm. As Elizabeth spoke, Sarah began to understand the true scope of Marcus Thorne's operation. This wasn't just a religious community. It was a death cult that had perfected the art of making murder look like spiritual transcendence. But somewhere in these underground chambers, people were still alive, still hoping for rescue. And now, Sarah had 3 days to find a way to save them all, including herself. The sound of metal scraping against concrete echoed through the basement corridors as Elizabeth led Sarah through a maze of underground passages. They moved carefully in the dim light, Elizabeth having somehow acquired a flashlight during the night shift change. The original building plans only showed this level as a root cellar, Elizabeth whispered as they walked. But Marcus had the whole underground area expanded after the first year. He told the construction crew they were building meditation chambers. They stopped at a heavy wooden door with a small window. Sarah peered through and gasped. Inside, a man in his 40s sat on a cot, staring at the wall with vacant eyes. His clothes were filthy, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in days. That's Brother Michael. He used to be Marcus's accountant until he started asking questions about the community's finances. Elizabeth moved to the next door. He's been down here for 8 months. Sarah looked through the second window and saw a woman about her own age pacing the small cell like a caged animal. And her? Sister Ruth. She tried to help another member escape last spring. They brought her back after 3 days in the forest. Elizabeth's voice was barely audible. She hasn't spoken since. The ceremony. What ceremony? Elizabeth's face went pale. They made her watch while they purified the person she tried to help. Her own daughter. The horror of it hit Sarah like a physical blow. She understood now why so many people had disappeared without a trace. Marcus had created a system where witnesses to murder were either killed themselves or so traumatized they couldn't function. Elizabeth, how many people know the truth about what happens here? Maybe 30 or 40 members of the inner circle. They're the ones who've been here longest, who've proven their absolute loyalty to Marcus. Everyone else. They live in willful ignorance. They have to survive. They continued through the passages, Elizabeth showing Sarah at least 15 more occupied cells. Each contained someone who had discovered too much, questioned too loudly, or tried to leave. Some appeared catatonic, others showed signs of physical torture, and a few pressed against their door windows with desperate hope when they saw Sarah's face. There's something else you need to see, Elizabeth said, leading her to a staircase that descended even deeper underground. The lower level smelled of dampness and something else Sarah didn't want to identify. Elizabeth's flashlight beam revealed a large chamber that had been converted into what could only be described as a shrine. Photographs covered the walls, hundreds of faces, all smiling, all looking impossibly young and hopeful. The purified, Elizabeth whispered. Marcus keeps their pictures here. He says their spirits guard the community now. Sarah studied the photographs, recognizing some faces from the missing person reports she'd compiled. There was Jennifer Walsh, who disappeared in 2011. David Park, missing since 2015. Maria Santos, gone in 2018. All of them had once been real people with families, dreams and futures that Marcus Thorne had stolen from them. My God, Sarah breathed. There must be over 100 photos here. 175, Elizabeth said. I've counted them. Marcus adds a new one after each ceremony. At the center of the shrine stood an altar made of smooth river stones. Dark stains covered its surface, and Sarah realized with growing horror that this was where the purification ceremonies took place. He makes the whole community watch, Elizabeth continued. Children too. He says witnessing the purification strengthens our faith, shows us the beauty of sacrificing for the greater good. Sarah turned away from the altar, feeling sick. The poison you mentioned, where does he get it? He makes it himself. There's a laboratory in the main building basement. Marcus has a chemistry background from his tech industry days. He's perfected a compound that causes what looks like peaceful death. No convulsions, no obvious signs of struggle. The victims just fade away while everyone sings. As they made their way back through the passages, Sarah's mind raced with the implications of what she'd seen. This wasn't just serial murder, it was mass murder disguised as religious ritual, with an entire community brainwashed into being witnesses and accomplices. Elizabeth, tomorrow night is the new moon, isn't it? Elizabeth nodded, tears streaming down her face. Marcus has already chosen who will be purified. Brother Michael, the accountant. His questions about missing money have made some of the other members suspicious. We have to stop this. We have to get help. How? The nearest neighbor is 20 miles away. Cell phones don't work out here. And even if we could contact the authorities, who would believe us? Marcus has spent 14 years building relationships with local officials. Half the sheriff's department thinks he's a saint. Sarah thought of her editor Jake, expecting her regular check-ins. By now he would know something was wrong. But would he be able to find her in time? There might be another way, Sarah said slowly. What if we could turn the community against Marcus? Show them evidence of what he's really doing. Elizabeth shook her head. You don't understand how deep the conditioning goes. People who've been here for years have witnessed dozens of purifications. They've convinced themselves it's divine will. To admit the truth now would mean accepting they've been accomplices to mass murder. As they returned to Sarah's cell, the weight of their situation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Tomorrow night, unless something changed dramatically, they would watch another innocent person die. And soon after, Sarah herself might face the altar of purification. But as Elizabeth locked the door behind her, Sarah noticed something that gave her a spark of hope. The young woman had left the flashlight behind, and more importantly, she'd left the door key within Sarah's reach. The circle of silence that protected Marcus Thorne was about to be broken. Sarah waited until the early morning hours when the night guards typically dozed at their posts. The key Elizabeth had accidentally left behind turned easily in the lock, and Sarah crept into the corridor with the flashlight dimmed to its lowest setting. Her first stop was Brother Michael's cell. The accountant looked up with startled hope when she opened his door. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Someone who's going to get you out of here," Sarah replied. "But I need your help first. You said you found something wrong with the community's finances?" Michael nodded eagerly, his mind seeming to sharpen with the prospect of purpose. "The money doesn't add up. Members contribute their life savings when they join, plus there's income from the farm and various businesses. But the expenses are way too low for a community of 200 people. Too low how? Food, utilities, medical care, everything costs less than it should for that many people. Either they're lying about their population numbers, or..." He paused, the implication hitting him. "Or there aren't really 200 people here anymore." Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. Marcus has been killing members and keeping their money. The community maintains the appearance of stability, while he systematically murders people and steals their assets. "My laptop is still in my old room in the main building," Michael said urgently. "I have spreadsheets that prove it. Bank records, contribution logs, expense reports, everything that shows the financial impossibility of their claimed population." Sarah made a decision that felt both desperate and necessary. "Can you make it to the surface on your own?" "I think." "So why?" "Because I'm going to get that laptop, and then we're going to show everyone in this community exactly what Marcus Thorne really is." The main building was eerily quiet as Sarah made her way through corridors she'd walked less than 2 days ago as a supposed guest. Michael's former room was on the 2nd floor, and Sarah's heart pounded as she climbed the stairs, expecting at any moment to encounter a guard or early rising community member. The laptop was exactly where Michael had said it would be, still sitting on a desk as if waiting for his return. Sarah grabbed it along with several folders of printed documents, stuffing everything into a canvas bag she found in the room's closet. Her luck ran out as she descended the stairs. Brother Paul stood at the bottom, no longer wearing his gentle smile. 2 other men flanked him, their expressions murderous. "Miss Collins," Brother Paul said softly, "did you really think we wouldn't notice your little midnight adventure?" "Actually, I was counting on it," Sarah replied, surprised by her own steadiness. "See, I'm not just a freelance writer. I'm an investigative journalist, and I've been documenting everything I've seen here." Brother Paul's eyes narrowed. Documentation won't help you now, maybe not. But it will help the FBI agents who are already on their way here. It was a bluff, but Sarah saw uncertainty flicker across Brother Paul's face. You're lying, am I? My editor expects me to check in twice daily. When I missed yesterday's calls, he contacted the authorities. They know exactly where I am and why I came here. One of the men whispered something to Brother Paul, who nodded grimly. Then we need to accelerate our timeline. Father Marcus will want to speak with you immediately. They escorted Sarah to Marcus's office, where the community leader sat behind his desk, as if he'd been waiting for her. The morning sun streaming through the windows illuminated his face, revealing an expression of cold calculation that transformed his features completely. Miss Sarah Mitchell of the Denver Tribune, he said, using her real name. Yes, we know who you are. Did you really think we wouldn't investigate someone asking so many questions? Sarah's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to remain calm. Then you know that people are looking for me. Perhaps. But people disappear in these mountains all the time. Tragic accidents usually. City folk who underestimate the wilderness. Marcus stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the forest. Your editor will receive a call this afternoon explaining that you decided to extend your stay for additional research. By the time anyone becomes truly concerned, the fall weather will have eliminated any inconvenient evidence. You're planning to kill me today. I'm planning to offer you the same gift I've offered 175 others released from the corruption of the outside world. Some accept it willingly, others require persuasion. But in the end, they all find peace. Sarah realized that Marcus genuinely believed his own delusions. In his mind, he wasn't a mass murderer, he was a savior, liberating souls from earthly suffering. What about the money? She asked. The millions of dollars you've stolen from your victims? Marcus turned back to her, his expression shifting to something almost resembling hurt. Stolen? I've used those resources to build something pure, something sacred. Every dollar has served the greater good. Your greater good. Your private bank accounts, your property, your power over life and death. For the first time, Sarah saw cracks in Marcus's composure. His jaw tightened, and his hands clenched into fists. You understand nothing about sacrifice, about vision. You're just another corrupted soul spreading doubt and poison. He turned to Brother Paul. Gather the community. It's time for an emergency purification ceremony. As they dragged Sarah from the office, she clutched Michael's laptop bag tightly. She had the evidence that could expose Marcus Thorne's crimes. But first she had to survive long enough to use it. The sound of a bell began ringing across the community, calling everyone to witness what Marcus intended to be Sarah's final moments. The entire community gathered in the main hall as the morning sun cast long shadows through tall windows. Sarah stood at the front of the room, flanked by Brother Paul and 2 other guards, while Marcus prepared his ceremonial sacred wine at a table that served as an altar. The assembled crowd watched with expressions ranging from religious fervor to barely concealed terror. My beloved family, Marcus began, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of countless sermons. We gather today to witness the purification of a soul corrupted by the outside world. This woman came to us pretending to seek truth, but she carried only doubt and suspicion. Sarah spotted Elizabeth in the crowd, her face pale but determined. Near the back, she could see several community members who looked uncomfortable, their faith clearly shaken by the hastily called ceremony. Before I accept your gift of purification, Sarah called out, her voice carrying across the silent hall, I'd like to share something with your community. Marcus's eyes blazed with anger. Silence. You will not corrupt these pure souls with your lies. What if they're not lies? Sarah held up Michael's laptop, which she'd managed to keep despite her captivity. What if I can prove that Marcus Thorne has been stealing from you, lying to you, and murdering your friends and family members for 14 years? A murmur ran through the crowd. Marcus raised his hand for silence, but Sarah pressed on. Brother Michael's financial records show that this community has collected over $12 million in member contributions since 2009. But the operating expenses only account for about $2 million. Where's the other $10 million, Marcus? Lies and deception, Marcus snapped. But Sarah noticed several community members exchanging worried glances. The records also show that you've been reporting a steady population of 200 members, but the actual food purchases, utility usage, and medical expenses indicate a population of maybe 50 people. What happened to the other 150? Sister Elizabeth, Sarah called out, making eye contact with the young woman across the room. Tell them about the photographs in the basement shrine. Tell them about the purification ceremonies. Where people don't volunteer, they're murdered. Elizabeth stepped forward, her voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. She's telling the truth. I've seen the underground chambers where people are imprisoned. I've watched Marcus poison members who asked too many questions or tried to leave. My own sister Emma was purified 3 months ago because she threatened to contact the authorities. The revelation hit the community like a physical blow. Several people gasped, others began crying, and a few started moving toward the exits only to find their way blocked by Marcus's inner circle. Enough! Marcus roared, pulling a gun from beneath his ceremonial robes. You will not destroy everything I've built with your lies. But the spell was broken. Community members began shouting questions, demanding answers, pushing back against the guards who tried to maintain order. In the chaos, Sarah saw her chance. She lunged toward the laptop, managing to power it on and connect it to the hall's projection system that Marcus used for his sermons. Michael's spreadsheets filled the wall-mounted screen, showing years of financial discrepancies in stark black and white. $12 million stolen, Sarah announced over the growing tumult. 175 people murdered. All documented in your leader's own records. The community erupted. Years of suppressed doubts and unasked questions poured out. As people realized the full scope of their leader's crimes, several members tackled the guards, while others tried to reach Marcus, who was backing toward his private exit with his gun drawn. You don't understand, Marcus screamed, his carefully maintained composure completely shattered. I saved them. I saved all of them from the corruption of the outside world. Everything I did was for the greater good. Elizabeth appeared at Sarah's side, having fought her way through the crowd. The underground chambers, she said urgently. We need to free the prisoners before Marcus's inner circle regroups. Together, they raced from the hall as the sound of sirens began echoing from the forest road. Jake had indeed contacted the FBI when Sarah missed her check-in calls, and Agent David Chun was leading a tactical team toward the community dot in the basement chambers. Sarah and Elizabeth worked frantically to unlock doors and free the surviving prisoners. Brother Michael emerged first, followed by Sister Ruth, and 15 others in various states of physical and psychological trauma. Some could walk on their own, others needed support, but all of them moved with the desperate urgency of people who knew they might not get another chance at freedom. As they reached the surface, FBI vehicles were pouring into the community compound. Agent Chun took one look at the emerging prisoners and immediately called for medical support and additional backup. Marcus Thorne? He asked Sarah, last seen in the main hall with a gun. His inner circle is armed too, and there are probably more weapons in the building. The final confrontation was brief but decisive. Marcus had retreated to his office, apparently planning to destroy financial records and other evidence. When FBI agents breached the door, they found him sitting behind his desk with his gun pointed at his own head. 14 years, he said. To Agent Chun, his voice now completely devoid of the charismatic power that had mesmerized so many followers. 14 years of perfect divine order, and you destroy it in one morning. Marcus Thorne, You're under arrest for murder, kidnapping, fraud, and multiple federal crimes," Chun announced. Marcus laughed bitterly. "Arrest me? I gave those people peace. I freed them from suffering. I built paradise in the wilderness, and you call it murder." He was still protesting his innocence when they led him away in handcuffs. 3 months later, Sarah sat in her Denver office, putting the finishing touches on her series about the Eternal Light community. The investigation had uncovered the remains of 142 people buried in remote locations throughout the property. Marcus Thorne had confessed to 175 murders during his psychiatric evaluation, though he continued to describe them as divine purifications. The surviving community members were receiving counseling and assistance from federal victim services. Elizabeth Martinez had testified at Marcus's preliminary hearing, helping to ensure he would face the death penalty for his crimes. On her desk sat a letter from Rebecca Martinez, thanking Sarah for finally bringing justice to the victims and their families. Attached was a photo of Rebecca with her therapy dog, standing in front of a small house in Oregon where she was starting a new life. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Jake's voice came through the speaker. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you, FBI Agent Chun." Agent Chun entered her office carrying a thick file folder. "Miss Mitchell, I wanted to thank you personally. Your investigation broke this case wide open. Without your work, Marcus Thorne might have continued his operation indefinitely." "What's the latest count?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. 175 confirmed victims over 14 years. "We're still identifying remains, but we believe we found all the burial sites." Chun paused, studying Sarah's face. "Are you okay? I know this has been difficult." Sarah nodded, though the nightmares still came regularly. "I keep thinking about all the people who tried to investigate before me. The families who filed missing person reports, the local authorities who were dismissed as conspiracy theorists. How many people could have been saved if someone had listened sooner?" "That's not your responsibility," Chun said firmly. Marcus Thorne was a master manipulator who fooled everyone from his followers to federal investigators. You did something extraordinary by exposing him. After Agent Chun left, Sarah returned to her article, but her mind kept drifting to the underground shrine with its wall of photographs. 175 faces, 175 stories that would never be completed. 175 families who finally had answers but would never have closure. The Eternal Light community had been anything but eternal, and its light had been the darkness of death masquerading as salvation. But sometimes, Sarah reflected, the most important stories were the ones that emerged from the deepest darkness, carrying truth into a world that desperately needed to hear it. Outside her office window, Denver's lights twinkled in the gathering dusk, and Sarah began typing the final paragraphs of her investigation. Somewhere in those words lay the voices of the victims, finally free to tell their stories to the world.